All right. So for today, I was looking at it ahead of time, and I know we have a big chunk to read. This was a bit of a longer passage, but this is once again me trying to keep like the story themes together and just to tell a complete story. So, catching up for those who haven't been with us as much, we are following the Jacob cycle right now. So the covenantal blessing has passed from Abraham to Isaac, and now from Isaac to Jacob. What a lot of scholars have noted is what happens at the beginning of Jacob's story kind of flips around and happens at the end. And so, since we've long passed the halfway point in Jacob's life, we see some echoes from the beginning of his story. And we're going to continue to see some of those echoes today. So, he has officially married both Leah and Rachel. Last week we read about the baby mania of them both trying to out baby each other, and it ended with Rachel finally having a child, the child which will be Joseph, who will be the next figurehead of the next story. But for now, it kind of switches back into more of Jacob's perspective. We know the other piece of context before we jump in specifically for today. We know that Jacob agreed to 7 years of service to marry Rachel. When he was tricked into marrying Leah instead, they said, give it a week to do your marital duties. Basically it's spend a week having sex and hopefully you have a child or your wife gets pregnant somewhere in there. That's kind of the idea. And then immediately he was allowed to marry Rachel, but with the agreement that he's going to keep working for 7 years. And so that's 14 years in total, but he gets both wives at the 7-year point, give or take. So when this story opens up, we are kind of at the tail end of the 7 years, which is why Jacob's contract is being negotiated with his father-in-law, Laban. What the additional things that we get in the story is that we see that Rachel and Leah have brothers that come into play, and that there's a lot of trickery. Tricksters are trying to out-trick each other. And so with that in mind, I'm curious about what your all's thoughts were on kind of just the overall thoughts of this progression of the story from breeding the sheeps to their escape and eventual covenant. What are some just initial thoughts about this passage? Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Well, I had a awakening moment when I was realized I had forgotten that that Jacob had all of this happening while he was still living with Laban.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm back to the second 7 years and realizing how many babies were born in the 7 years, and all of this compacted into a much smaller time frame than I had been thinking about. So that surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has to work some more to get some flock, some sheep to take back, I guess. And then there's all this business about the stripes and the spotlight, and I couldn't. That was just beyond me.
Okay, so we'll definitely touch on what's going on with the sheep and the stripe and the spots.
Spots, yes.
Well, I got the idea that he made it the better sheep, the ones that were stronger. So not only had quite a few sheep because of the things he did with the genetic part of it, which I didn't understand, having to do with twigs and things. But he picked the best stock and ended up very wealthy. But it wasn't very nice. Not at all. He really paid him back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess this kind of thing is okay with at this point, God thinks this kind of stuff is just fine.
Well, we will get in, or so let's go ahead and jump in, since this is kind of like two tricksters going at it in a way, that they each get a little bit of their own medicine, and we will see who actually comes out on top by the end of the story. Because
Right.
by the end of the story, there's not one, there's not two, but there's actually three tricksters involved. And this passage actually has one of my favorite jokes in the Bible. And I love it within context. So let's go ahead and jump in. So it opens up in chapter 30, verse 25, with Jacob's initial plea that it's like, send me away to my father's country. So this is kind of the like, I've done my service, like I've given you my time, I want to go. Evidently, it sounds like Laban's not the easiest person to live around, and knowing that he's kind of a trickster person, you can kind of understand. It's like, let me go home. It's time. I want to like return to my people, my country. But we also see that Laban doesn't want to let him go right now. He's very open, or he's kind of just says very bluntly, I've been blessed because of you. Like, he's not going to give up the person who's making him a lot of money, but he does relent and say, name your price. And so this is where we get into the whole thing about the speckled sheep, the spotted sheep, and the mottled sheep, the black lambs and the white sheep and the black goats. And so let me sort this out just a little bit. So sheep that are speckled, spotted, striped, or mottled are considered imperfect. They're considered discolored. They're actually considered second tier. If you read later in like the laws in Leviticus, you will see that only white sheep that are unspotted, unspeckled, blemish-free are acceptable for sacrifice. And sheep, or at least the local sheep there, they are white, and goats are black. So goats are supposed to be all black, sheep are supposed to be all white, and so Jacob is saying, let me take the discolored ones from you. You can have all the perfect sheep, you can have all the white ones, no problem. I'll take all the discolored ones, and that will be my wages. It kind of reminds me of like when my father would walk into the kitchen after my mom had been baking, and it's like, oh, this cookie's deformed. You can't take that to the bake sale. I'll just eat the deformed cookie. So how does that change the situation if you see that Jacob's kind of saying, let me just take the discolored ones?
Okay. Yeah, because then he's going to go ahead and try to make them stronger. He's going to improve the breed.
So this is where the trickery starts going back and forth between these two. So Jacob kind of selfishly says, I'll take the second tier sheep and goats. You get to keep the good ones. You get to keep the pretty ones. You get to keep the perfect ones. I'll take the second tier ones. And it took me a little bit to figure out what was going on here, but thank goodness for the notes at the bottom of the page. So if you look at verse 35, 34, Laban says, good, let it be as you said. So he's like, fine, yeah, that sounds good. And then, but in 35, but that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and everyone that had white on them, and every lamb that was black. So notably, those are all the things that Jacob said, let me take the discolored ones, and he takes all the discolored ones out of the flock that day, gives those to his sons that are 3 days away. So he effectively steals all of Jacob's wages and gives it to his sons that are 3 days away. So they're out of sight. Jacob can't see them. They are no longer in Jacob's control. So Laban agrees to the terms of Jacob's wages and then takes it and hides it away. So effectively, Jacob returns to Laban's flock to see them all perfectly white or perfectly black.
Okay.
Okay.
So, all right, I'm just leaving room to respond. So anyways, so this is some of the initial conflict. This is why Jacob does the next thing, because now he is working with a perfectly white flock. And he's like, oh, great, I none of these are mine. So this is just purely magic, what he's doing. There is no scientific thing of, he basically, the wood that sticks that he uses are spotted. So he's basically putting spotted sticks in front of sheep when they mate, so they have spotted babies. But he only does it for the strongest sheep. And so for the strong sheep, once again, he's trickstering the trickster. He's putting spotted sticks in front of the strong sheep. And then for the not strong sheep, he just like lets them breed normally. And so when the spotted stick is in front of the sheep, they come out spotted, mottled, and striped. So they're his. And then the perfectly white sheep that are weak are Laban's sheep.
But this is going to take several generations of reproduction
Yes.
before Jacob has amassed his fortune. I mean, this isn't going to happen in I don't know, a year, maybe. I don't know how long. I'm not sure what the
What, 1 or
gestation
2
of-
babies a year or what?
I don't know. I don't know how rapidly they reproduce. And you don't know how many he's going to have to accumulate, you know. either.
So I forget where in my notes it says it, but it's estimated to be 7 plus 7 plus 6. And I don't know where the 6 comes from, but it's like 6 years of him doing this.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not unreasonable, I guess.
But I don't know where that number comes from. It was just in my notes.
Especially if you believe that putting a spotted stick in front of a sheep changes its genes, you know.
So do you all buy this? I mean, this feels like magical thinking, doesn't it? Like we're just gonna put a spotted stick.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there another explanation, a more practical situation we can think of why this would be the case?
To him, it explained how they get more tainted, so to speak, sheep.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know about genetics, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, genetics actually probably has a lot to do with this situation. I know less about dog genetics, but I do know about cats, and like most cats actually have a tabby gene in them. So unless you have a purebred cat, if they have a litter of kittens, there's normally 1 or 2 tabby cats in them. And so if your wages are tabby cats, and most cats carry a tabby gene, that's what you're eventually gonna amass a collection of tabby cats.
Mhm.
But similarly, if you have a more purebred animal, they tend to have more health defects. And so the more genetically diverse you have, the more spotted sheep you're gonna get, but also the more genetically diverse and therefore healthier they likely are. So there's likely just a chance genetic thing, but it's explained by the spotted stick method,
Mhm.
which is just kind of funny.
Yeah,
According to my notes at the bottom, it said that the ancient breeders believed that whatever the female was looking at the time
Right.
would influence what happened.
Yeah.
That might explain what he did, but it doesn't explain the magic of it. I like your idea of a gene already contained
oh, yes.
in there.
That's the modern explanation. However, the one thing, the symbolicness, there is a little bit of symbolism tied in here, because Jacob is the father of nations. Like where Abraham is seen as like the father of many, Jacob is literally the one that is giving birth to the 12 tribes of Israel. he's basically seen as fertility incarnate. And this is kind of one of the places where we see it, that like he not only is fathering 12 children and the 12 nations of Israel, but he is also fathering sheep upon sheep upon sheep, and he's evident a fertility wizard for making his flock grow. So it is tied up in that like fertility idea that this guy he's fertile, that's for sure.
But all the men in that line seem to be.
Right. So, even though Laban has attempted to cheat him out of a flock, and then Jacob goes back and cheats him by messing with fertility in the ancient notion, this lands Jacob in the uncomfortable situation where the sons of Laban start not being happy about this. Because by their logic, this guy is stealing all of our wealth. He took and they start whispering about him. Let's see, this is at the beginning of chapter 31. They're saying Jacob has taken that was our father's wealth. He has gained all of this wealth and it belongs to our father. And if it belongs to their father, that means it eventually will go to them. So it's like, this dude is stealing from us. And Jacob kind of hears this through the grapevine, and then he's like, okay, I got to get out of here. At the point where the family is whispering, I don't want to deal with this. And we get the Lord saying to Jacob, return to the land of your ancestors, to your kindred, and I will be with you. This is the first time we've heard from God in a while. Last time we heard from God, God directly said, I will be with you until you return. And there's kind of that promise of safety. And now it kind of is the call home of, come on home, I'm still going to be with you. Let's make the journey. So what do you all think about this point? Or kind of looking back at like the whole thing that Jacob's been through with this family, and now he's getting the call to go back home.
Well, and God is also saying it was okay what you did because he did stuff to you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, giving him a blessing for being a trickster.
Yeah. Because
the retaliation's okay.
So where are you seeing that approval specifically? Is it just the like, come on home, or is there like a specific line where you're picking that up?
I thought it said at one point that I don't know where it was, but that he did not keep his promises, so it's okay what you did. I misread it.
Oh, okay. I think that's a little bit further on, because Jacob later gives a speech to Leah and Rachel, kind of explaining his thinking.
Okay.
But yeah, he has his complaint. Like it goes on from there. Let's see. After God says like, come home, go back to the land of your ancestors. We have verse 4. He sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock is. And then he says, I see your father doesn't regard me favorably as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all of my strength, and he has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not permit him to harm me.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, there's a bit of a longer speech. Then it's kind of, he describes a dream sequence that he has, which once again, we're seeing two different narratives that are kind of woven together. We have the God that speaks directly and the God that speaks in dreams. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah. Well, in that dream, God tells, God says he cheated. I am the God of Bethel, where you announce, but he talked something. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you.
Yeah.
So he does say, in the dream at least, God says, you know, look at, I see everything that Laban's been doing to you. You know, when you put up that nice pillar and did all those good things, you know, so you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to give permission for sticking up for yourself, and even if it means retaliation.
Cheating.
It's okay to stick up for yourself, guys.
Right. So at this point, so yeah, to kind of bring it together, Leah and Rachel kind of speak in one voice, saying, is there any portion or inheritance in our house? Our dad's been spending the money that you gave him. We have nothing here. He has sold us. He's been using up the money given for us. All the property God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children now. So do what God's told you to do. So they're making a plan to hit the road. And I'm curious for you all, and you're all thinking, is this a good plan? Is this understandable? Is this reactionary? Is like, what do you all think of this whole plan of like, okay, I've finally made my wealth. Now the family doesn't like me. I'm gonna head for the hills again.
I don't see anything wrong with the plan. What's wrong with the plan? It sounds like
Nothing. I just want to know your all's opinion of it.
it's a good idea. He's been there a really long time. I don't think he expected to have to be away that long.
Yeah. He just
It was
went to get a
gonna-
wife.
Mm-hmm.
He also learned a lot about being a raiser of sheep. He got very wealthy. He's going back with lots of sons and lots of livestock.
I was a little surprised at how easily Rachel and Leah switched their allegiance from their father, I know, to Jacob. You know, I mean, it just seemed like, hey, Jacob's got all the marbles. We better join with him.
Well, they didn't like what their father was doing.
Well,
Yeah.
did they like what Jacob was doing?
We don't know that.
Yeah, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, right.
Well, when the girls saw what their brothers were up to and their brothers' complaints
The
and their
brothers.
brothers' motivation, it became really clear that they had no role in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And so when they say, is there any portion of inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners, for he has sold us?
Mm.
You know, they're really coming to terms with reality here. They're not the pampered little girls of their father anymore. Their brothers are making moves to plan ahead and plan to take over all of this, and their role would continue to be subservient to their brothers. So it's kind of like a reality check here for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the reality, we don't know where Rachel and Leah are in the birth order, but the inheritance goes to the firstborn son,
Son. Yeah.
and they're not that.
Mhm.
So as long as you're not the firstborn son, you're not going to inherit the same way. So yeah, they're kind of like waking up to the, oh shoot, our brothers are making plans, and this affects us.
Yeah, Leah is the older daughter. That's why she got married first.
Yeah.
Mm.
So from this point, Jacob arises, he takes his children, his wife, and puts them on camels, because he's at this point acquired camels. And once again, there's a weird word here, and I had to do a little investigation. He drove them away is like a cattle drive. He's starting the big migration. He's pushing everything he owns. His possessions, and all of that, he's kind of like built it up. He's kind of got the caravan going, and he starts pushing out. The thing, this comes into play for like one of my favorite parts of the story, but it does take some explanation here. So he starts the cattle drive or the sheep drive. He's driving them back down to where his family's from, because remember, he's like up north of where Israel is. And it's explained that Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel steals the household gods.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So, little explanation here, because this is, I know the story, but I was like, what's the purpose of the household gods? Doing the research, it says that the household gods are like ancestral, like totems kind of a thing. We don't know if these are like full big G gods, or if these are kind of more like ancestor worship kind of things that remind you of the family where you came from. But it is noted that in this tradition, when you do have household gods, they are seen as the patriarchal blessing, and they go to the firstborn son. And Rachel steals the blessing of the patriarch, Laban.
Wow. Okay.
Who does she sound like?
Who does she sound?
Who also stole the patriarchal blessing?
Oh,
Eve.
Jacob
Jacob,
from Esau.
right.
That's right. Mhm.
So she's beginning to show that she really is the perfect counterpart to her husband, because her husband stole the patriarchal blessing from his brother, and now she's stealing the patriarchal blessing from her brothers.
Wow.
Go Rachel.
I told you, this story loops around on itself all the time. And another comment about language, just because this one has a double meaning, and it's one of those things where it's supposed to mean both. The next line in verse 20, where it says, "And Jacob deceived Laban," this can also be translated as Jacob stole the heart of Laban,
Oh,
which is a little bit more emotion filled. And we also get the tagline that Laban is an Aramean, which has political connotations later on down the story, but just we now know that Jacob is an Aramean. And so he steals off in the when Laban's out of the house. He didn't tell him he intended to flee. When it said that, I was like, I don't think if you are fleeing, you tell people you're fleeing. That kind of defeats the purpose of fleeing. But at any rate, he takes off with everything he has. He starts out to cross the Euphrates River, and he goes to the hill country of Gilead. So now they're off, they're fleeing, and it takes 3 days for Laban to realize his sons, his daughters, his grandchildren, and a good chunk of his flock are gone. But he takes up an army, and it says he took his kinfolk with him and pursued him for 7 days. The notes down below also say this is like a quasi-military sounding thing. If you remember Abraham gathering up the kinfolk to save Lot, this is kind of a similar thing. This isn't just like, I am like riding after on my camel to follow after my daughters. This is, I am gearing up for an attack because this guy's running away. So is Laban's response equal to what Jacob is doing?
It's a last-ditch effort to stay in control.
Yeah, I would say yes, because again, according to my notes at the bottom, possession of the household goods, according to ancient custom, ensures your leadership of the family. So if Jacob's got all the stuff, Laban's lost his stature, his leadership. So yeah, he's got to go after him.
Right. Yeah. And so Laban overtakes Jacob eventually because, of course, Laban and the kinfolk are like going on fast moving animals, and Jacob is taking not just the camels and the children, but the herds that he's kind of herding that direction as well. So he's understandably slower. And Laban has this big rant. Like, why have you done this? You've deceived me. You left. I would have thrown you a party. You didn't let me kiss my daughters or my grandchildren. What you have done is foolish. You've taken my daughters off like they're captives. But we do have just before that God, the Lord God, comes to Laban and says, don't say anything good or bad, like don't harm this dude. And he kind of says that like, God told me not to attack you, but I really want to because what you did was bad. But it then ends with, why did you steal my household gods? Like, not only is it like, you stole my stuff, you took my daughters, you didn't let me say goodbye, but why did you steal the gods? So what do you think of Laban at this point? Is this a genuine frustration? Is Laban still kind of that like trickster, greedy person? What do we think of Laban's character at this point?
Well, he's justified in what he's complaining of.
You think so?
He hasn't accused Jacob of doing anything that he didn't do or arranged to have done.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of whining and a little bit, and I think he realizes what's happened.
Yeah, he's got the short end of the stick at the present time.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of been brought down a notch or two.
He was scared. I mean, there goes his wealth, his whole sense of who he is just disappeared over the hills. And, all the control of all the people that he thought he had his destiny under control, and it just got away from him. And it appears to me that he's very concerned about the loss of the household gods. And it is, why did you steal my gods? And Jacob answered Laban, because I was afraid. But then it goes on into 32 and says, now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So that part's confusing right now. I don't get that.
Well, one thing too, that maybe these gods represented something spiritual, which is above and beyond anything physical. And the stealing the sheep and the children and all that was bad enough, but the gods, that's the one thing maybe that he really treasured and wanted to keep, and it represented something to him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little mean.
But Rachel did it.
Right.
Rachel did it, right. Laban didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. So it does seem that Rachel stole the household gods without her husband knowing. That much it does seem, by at least by the story's telling, that Jacob didn't think he did that. Notably, there is one thing in Jacob's vow that this actually flies in the face of. If you remember, when he poured the oil on the pillar before he went into this area, he said, if you do this, you will be my God. And like, I'm going to do what you say, like, you're going to keep me safe and you're going to be my God. That was kind of the spoken agreement. And if he had stolen the house, if Jacob himself had stolen the household gods, that would actually break that. So there's part of his thing where like, these are kind of considered deities. And this is where we see a little bit of a transition point, because it seems like Rachel believes in the power of these household gods. Why else would she have taken them? She doesn't want to journey somewhere without the gods that she grew up with. It seems like these gods are not the same as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Mhm.
which is
No.
interesting because the thought is go back to my people and like go to the people that believe in Yahweh. And yet Laban's family seem to have a different kind of religious background, which is where we kind of see this interplay between moving from a time where there is multiple gods and everyone has kind of their own, and like you worship your household gods, you have your household deities, you probably recognize a few universal ones, but the God of Abraham is said to be the universal God, kind of like the God over all. And so Rachel steals what amounts to be statues, but they feel very inert in this story, don't they? It's
Yeah,
like
and
they're
something later that they say, that God says, don't make a likeness of me. That's
Mhm.
with Moses, right?
Yeah.
That's later. So they had to deal with that eventually
right.
because it was still around.
But we do see how the household gods are kind of treated differently than the Lord. The Lord has agency, the Lord acts, but Rachel seems to take the household gods thinking they're going to do the same thing. She wants the blessing, she wants her family's lineage or something that's connected to them. She didn't want to travel without them. Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Well, or else she wants her final blow to her father was to take them away from him. And she's asserting her power. I don't have a better word right now, but it's the first we're seeing her asserting herself and maybe starting the role of the matriarch where, she's using your word agency. She's finding her agency in this story. And I don't know what's coming regarding the gods, so I'm speculating here.
Okay.
But maybe she doesn't want them for herself, for her devotion, but she wants her father to not have them.
So these household gods are the seat of his authority, where we've seen that the covenant with the Lord passes down through a verbal blessing. It seems to be that in her family, the blessing and the like power of the patriarch is passed on with these objects. And so
And she
by
took them.
taking them, she literally is taking his authority as the patriarch away.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which is,
She's stripping.
stripping him of his power.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk about my favorite joke in the Bible, and it is a period joke. There's no other way to say it. It's, but Dad, I'm on my period, is the translation of what Rachel is doing when she's sitting on her
yeah.
camel saddle. So, Jacob's like, I don't know what you're talking about these household gods. Like, search my stuff. They're like, I didn't take them. And he didn't because Rachel took them. And so he searches the whole camp, can't find them. And he goes into Rachel's tent. And the notes are saying that like, this is like the female space because it's her tent and he seems to be bumbling around. And once again, this sounds kind of like an echo of what happened with Jacob. He is like feeling around, just like patting down, kind of like he Isaac was feeling for his son's arms, and it's like, are you my son? Laban instead is feeling around, and it's like, where are the gods? Where are they? And he gets to Rachel and it's like, get off your saddle. And she basically says, but Dad, I'm on my period. Sorry. Which means that the saddle is unclean. He doesn't want to touch it because, ew, nope, don't want to do that. But she's sitting on them. She's literally sitting on the household gods. And that's how she does it. She hides them and gets away with this. Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Doesn't that fact that she says, I don't know whether she is or not, but she says she's on her period and she's sitting on the household gods. Doesn't that defile them?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It technically would, yes, entirely.
But she's lying.
It's assumed she's lying and just
Yeah.
once again tricking the trickster, out tricking the trickster character.
Mhm.
And this is where it's seen that like Rachel is the true counterpart to Jacob, because they're literally kind of pulling parallel stunts here. And so she has effectively stolen the patriarchal blessing.
Okay.
So from that point, after Laban comes back empty-handed, no household gods, now it's Jacob's turn to get angry. And he's asking him, like, what have I actually done wrong? I know I've offended you, but what did I actually do wrong? You changed my wages. You made my life difficult. Oh, here we go. Verse 38. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried. I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by the wild beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss myself. Of your hand you required it, whether it was stolen by day or by night. It was like this with me, and by the heat consumed me, and by the cold of the night my sheep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served 14 years for your daughters, 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. So that's where we get the 20 years. He's worked 20 years. And now you accuse me of these things?
Mhm.
So is Jacob justified in his complaint against Laban?
Yes.
Mhm.
They didn't have to work for the other brides, did they? I mean, they just went and married them, right?
Normally a bride comes with a dowry.
Okay.
So you in different cultures it works different ways. Sometimes the groom pays the bride's family, which is I think what is normative here, because it's seen that you are taking away a productive member of the family, so you pay for her absence in the family, and maybe with the dowry price you would be able to hire an extra person to do the work that she was doing.
I see.
Other cultures flip it around, and you have, I believe in India, it's the bride that pays the groom's family because you are paying them for taking on your financial burden. And so it's kind of seen as her social security. If her husband never dies, she has a pot of money. But in that culture, the dowry goes with the bride instead of in replacement of. But if you remember, Jacob shows up empty-handed, so he can't pay the bride price. Therefore, he worked the 14 years in lieu of paying a dowry, basically. But he hasn't just worked 14 years. He says, I've worked 20. I paid for your 2 daughters. I've paid for the flock that I'm walking away with. What's your problem? And the irony here, once again, referring to the notes, they say Rachel stole the household gods, probably hoping for a blessing of some kind, or stripping Laban of something, either stripping him or wanting that patriarchal blessing. And Jacob asserts that he is walking away blessed, not because of that, but because if the God of my father, of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac, the Hebrew there is unclear, so that's what they're translating it as. If that God had not been on my side, surely you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So Jacob isn't saying, like, I tricked you. It's not saying I worked hard for this. It's saying this is God's doing. God blessed me and God rebuked you. Yeah, Mary Ellen.
How did he rebuke him? I'm missing the connection.
Evidently by Jacob leaving, and Jacob leaving for 3 days before Laban realized, Jacob is accounting or counting that as God rebuking him, especially since God sent the message to leave. It was where are we? If you go back at the beginning of 31, God says, return to the land of your people. I think that is considered the rebuke, because Jacob's return is because God told him to return. Therefore, that is a rebuke of Laban. Like his leaving is a sign of God. So they have both expressed their anger. They have had at each other. And Laban's response is, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All that you see is mine.
Fine.
But what can I do about these daughters of mine, or about these children whom they have borne? Come now and make a covenant, you and I, and let us be witness between you and me. So Laban's final assertion is, this is still mine. Is this just the last remark of a desperate, power-hungry man? Is this him mourning the loss of his daughters? Or what do you make of this last comment here?
Well, he has some justification in making that statement, in that he provided the wherewithal for all that has transpired. I mean, he bore he got the daughters, he got the sheep, he got the goats. Jacob certainly made things better, but he was working with what Laban had provided him to work with.
Well, he did a very good job. He produced all those sons and all those perfect animals.
Mm-hmm.
But does Laban kind of let that go? They have a kind of way of kind of coming to terms with it. Is that what he does?
Yeah, they make an agreement and they sort it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think Laban actually wants to attack, but he still sees all of this as his own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he gives in. He acquiesces that, he looks at all that he's losing. He really can't do anything about getting that back. So he imposes what this agreement is going to be. He decides the conditions, excuse me, between, neither one shall pass beyond this point in the other's direction. And that, it's interesting to me that he says that Jacob can't have any more wives. I don't know where that fits into all of this, but Laban is the one who's initiating this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of this, this has been high drama and low kind of like takeaway points. But here's where I do see a takeaway point to consider is, when should the older generation let the younger generation make its own mistakes?
Mm-hmm.
When is the appropriate time to hand over the reins and let the next generation kind of assert their own will in the world?
It seems like he's decided that it's time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really have much choice.
Right. Yeah, Mary Ellen.
I don't see where letting the younger generation go and make their own mistakes. I don't see that here. I see
Okay.
him acquiescing to something he really doesn't want, but he doesn't have control over it. Like to take it back by force, they would both be big losers. And I mean, he brought his kinsfolk as an army. And I think he just realized he can't win this battle. So, you know, he will make this truce, but under his own conditions.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I see that.
Yeah.
So I guess where my thinking is at seeing this kind of as the I have raised these kids, I have raised these flocks, I have built this up, and they want to go a different direction than I want to go.
Mhm.
And there's a sense where it's like after you raise people, after you raise adult children, like at a certain point you don't have control over them anymore. They're going to make their own choices, and his daughters are not children anymore. They're mothers, they're wives, they're adults. And it seems like this almost like conundrum of a parent of, I have given my daughters everything, I have like given them this good life, and they are choosing something that I don't want them to choose. And kind of that almost struggle that I assume that a lot of parents have to face at a certain point when you raise your children the best you can, and all of a sudden you're not in control anymore. And there is that, like, I wish I could make these decisions for them, but I can't.
Mhm.
And so instead of making decisions for them, he kind of sets up some parameters of like that he's hoping are going to protect them. Like, yeah, he wants to protect himself, where it's like, Jacob, you can't attack me and take more of my stuff. Here's the boundary. Neither of us are going to cross it. We're going to stay out of each other's hair. But also setting up the parameter of, yeah, you don't get any more wives. I can't enforce this, but I want my daughters to have the best life possible, so don't you dare marry anyone else.
I think he has enough to keep himself busy right now.
Oh,
He
yeah.
has the equivalent of 4 wives.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, they set up 2 pillars. They have 2 feasts. Laban has 2 vows. All of this is considered because one of the vows is for the boundary crossing. Like, we're not going to cross this. I'm not going to attack you. You're not going to attack us. And then the other one is, don't take any more wives. One is, God will be your judge. The other one is, God will be the judge between us. The odd detail, because I know we're getting close on time, one last odd detail that kind of draws into this question of like, are we talking about one God or multiple gods? In verse 53, Laban says, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So there's a question of whether or not the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor are the same God, or if they are the 2 gods of the 2 different parties. And there's actually a strong likelihood that Laban is actually evoking 2 different deities as kind of the judges of the situation. Even though Abraham is Nahor's son, it's kind of seen that there might be 2 different gods going on here, which may be the household gods that Rachel
Well,
just stole.
Yeah.
So
Where does this Nahor come from? Do we know anything more about what that refers to? Who that
So
God
if you
was?
flip all the way back to chapter 11, you will see Nahor is the father of Abraham.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So
so
he's
it's the
evoking
God, it's the God of Nahor. Okay, not me.
Oh,
Okay.
that's
yeah, not the god named Nahor. No,
Or, yeah,
Nahor is
okay.
God.
It is, yeah, Nahor is Abraham's father. Yeah,
Or wait, no, I'm double checking. Grandfather.
grandfather. Okay.
I was thinking that the household gods, would that be anything like the having those little shrines in the houses in Mexico of the Virgin Mary?
Probably not the same, but maybe something similar, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this kind of concludes Jacob's time with Laban. Trickster's going at it. What are your final thoughts about this trickster versus trickster with another trickster in the middle? And it's messy, right? What do you think of this situation?
Now he finally broke free.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob finally got out from under Laban's thumb, after 20 years. I mean, basically, the sons of Leah would be young men at this point and could have families of their own. This is, this has been going on too long, that Jacob has served his time for his wives and his flock. Finally, he's on his own, away from Laban.
Now, is Isaac still alive? Okay, we don't know what's
We
happening.
will see. That's next
Okay.
chapter.
Okay.
But
No,
not
it's-
only that, like, he's not just free of Laban, he's finally out from the foot of his brother. He's like free. He's finally like out on his own. Yeah, Clay, I saw you.
Yeah, all this trickster stuff doesn't really seem that unusual. We just keep seeing it. It almost seems as though this is sometimes how you have to do things.
It's the genetics.
Yeah. And and the fact that it's over 20 years, those sheep didn't change overnight. That took years and years. So it's like a long range plan sometimes a short range plan, sometimes a long range, but it seems as though it's not unusual or unique to do this.
Mhm.
If things aren't going to work out the other way, this is plan B.
What is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Mary Ellen?
I see that the trickster stuff going on between Jacob and Laban, whatever. And I see all that as just kind of normal, not out of the ordinary. I mean, this is a young man trying to break free. This is an older man trying to hold on to his wealth. But Rachel's role in this, she's vindictive. And she did it to punish her father or to take the God for herself. I don't know what's coming. But that part I want to know, is there anything that comes in the future regarding what she's done or regarding the gods of his household? Does that come to play again?
Not directly, but assumed indirectly. The fast forward little window into it is Rachel actually doesn't live too much longer. And one assumption may be that her life may have been shortened because of Jacob's vow that, like, you will be my God, and she doesn't honor that, and so her life is actually cut very short. She will have one more kid, but yeah, she actually doesn't live too much longer after this. So her life is short. Larry.
Yeah, again, to me, you have to remember that in the Bible, time is a very fluid sort of thing. We're so used to thinking of time in our terms. The writers of that story, they had no concept. At least they paid no attention to time particularly, except to use it in the story. So all of this taking part is just to further the story and to make it appealing. Yeah.
Well, a lot of these tricksters also, those were human decisions. I don't think they were recommended by God. They were things that humans did, but God went ahead and did what he had to do in order to make it all right. But I think the human decisions are the ones that make the trouble.
Yeah, they always do.
Well, God in this particular passage doesn't seem to, he's not scolding them for doing it.
No, but he God can do an awful lot of things when things go wrong. We don't see what God's doing. It might take a long time for us to realize it, but God takes these things and makes them into good. And I believe that.
Well, I'm still disturbed that God was so accepting of the fact that we got a bunch of cheaters here that and he doesn't seem to get that upset about it. He helps them, he picks sides, and he then goes along with them to make them safe and looks over them. So I think that's kind of puzzling.
Well,
And-
he seems to feel it's justified. It's justified to do what Jacobs did was justified, given the fact that he had been cheated.
So the question that gets brought up again and again with this is, what is considered good? What is considered righteous? What is considered the good course of action when you're working in a situation that is inherently unfair? Laban was never going to be fair with Jacob. And Jacob had to work within a system that was going to be rigged against him. And so the response in a lot of scripture is, if the cards are stacked against me, I'm going to play the system. If it's a rigged system, I'm going to cheat my way to have a good life. And I don't think that's a moral standing that we see a lot in today. I mean, we see it, but we don't like hold it up as like the ideal of this is what you should do. We think we have, or at least what I see as like our cultural norms is, you should be honorable. You should earn money in a way that you can, that is, you don't feel guilty about. You should do it in a way that like hard work is responsible for your wealth and your comfort. And what we see in this situation is Jacob's like, yeah, I worked hard and it didn't get me anywhere. I worked hard, but I still got cheated. So if I get cheated, I'm gonna deal it right back. And I think that is unusual. That is not the point of view we often hold up in today's world.
No, people cheat without justification. They just do it to get ahead. There's all sorts of cheating that goes on. But they aren't doing it to retaliate. They're just doing it to get rich.
And so some people look at Jacob and see him doing the same thing. So it's like, does this hold up, that kind of behavior? How do we respond? And so
Well, it certainly wouldn't be what Jesus would have suggested.
I'm sorry, I have to leave for an appointment, so
okay.
I will leave you now, but thanks very much.
All right, take care. All right. Ooh, we are very over time. So that question is gonna stay with us for a little bit, because the situation that our characters are gonna be in is gonna keep being unfair. And the question is, what happens when you try to do the right thing, and the right thing gets you in trouble, and the not right thing seems to put you ahead? So that question's gonna continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Ellen?
Kristen, will you stay online for just a sec after you close the meeting?
Yeah, sounds good. Can do.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
So let us pray. Let us close with a word of prayer. God of Abraham and God, you are also the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. All these figures that we are reading about, and we know that you stuck with them through thick and thin in these stories. We have these stories of your faithfulness and how you continue to bless them even as we question their actions today. We wonder if they are good, or at least good for us, and we wonder where we fit into your story, and if our actions and our decisions are the decisions you would want for us in our lives. And so I ask that you always be our wisdom, always be a discerning voice in our minds, so that we will know what route to take and how to both do the righteous and the just thing, but also be able to stand up for ourselves and protect our families. So be with us always, as we know that you stay with us even as we are flawed, even as we do make some less than desirable choices. God, you have shown generation through generation, you stick with us, and we thank you for that. So we pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.